Welcome back to Economics by Arsha, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the 5 determinants of demand. So how I'm going to structure this video is that I'm actually going to talk about just one of them, and then split this into 5 different videos to make sure that you guys have a deep understanding of each of them. So quick recap. Demand is the quantity of goods and services that consumers are willing and able to purchase at a given price and at a given time, ceteris paribus. So, quick reminder, ceteris paribus literally just means all things equal, and is used to ensure that the reader understands that the economist or the student is just talking about one factor at a time. So, moving on, the 5 determinants of demand are income, the price of other products, consumer tastes and preferences, seasonal changes, and increase in population size. So, these 5 determinants of demand are actually just factors that affect a consumer's demand for a product. And all of these 5 determinants of demand result in a shift of the whole demand curve, because there isn't a change in price, but a change in the amount or quantity of the good demanded at every price. If this is a little confusing, I'm actually going to get into income and normal versus inferior goods using a graphical example so you'll understand this better. So today we're going to be focusing on the first determinant of demand, income. So let's start with normal goods. Normal goods are goods whose demand would increase with an increase of a consumer's income. This is because now the consumer has the willingness and the ability to purchase more quantities of the good. Why? Because they have more of a disposable income to be able to spend on more quantities of the good. For reference, an example of a normal good would be laptops. If your salary increased, now you have the ability to buy more quantities of the good or more laptops because you have more of a disposable income. This would actually result in a shift of the entire demand curve to the right. And this is because there is an increase in the quantity demanded of the good at every price. At this price, at this price, and at this price, for reference. There's an increase in the quantity demanded of this good. Therefore, the entire curve shifts. The next type of good is an inferior good. These are goods whose demand would decrease with an increase of the consumer's income, because they are now willing and able to purchase better quality or premium goods. Because the increase in their income allows them to now have more money to purchase, per se, better goods. An example of this would be branded clothing. Initially, you might be someone who purchases clothes from thrift shops, but with an increase in your income, you now have the ability to buy branded clothing. And so your demand for thrifted clothing would decrease, while your demand for branded clothing would increase simply because you're now able to afford it. So, in the case of inferior goods, with an increase in the consumer's demand, because the demand decreases, the demand curve would actually shift to the left. Why? Because again, at every single price, there is a decrease in the quantity demanded. And this isn't influenced by the price, but simply because of an increase in the consumer's income. Now, let us do some example questions that you might come across in this topic. The first one is, the working class in Switzerland experienced an increase in minimum wage levels. Evaluate the effect of this change on the market for MacBooks. So the first thing we would do is draw a graph for the market of MacBooks. And actually, this graph should have a title. So the title here would be the market for MacBooks. Now, over here, I have drawn a demand curve for the initial demand for MacBooks before an increase in minimum wage levels. And for reference, the y-axis represents the price of MacBooks, and the x-axis represents the quantity of MacBooks. So with an increase in minimum wage levels, we can assume that now consumers have a greater disposable income. Therefore, they are likely to want to buy or purchase more MacBooks because they now have the ability. And remember, the reason for this is because MacBooks are a normal good, not an inferior good. So, in theory, their demand would increase. What this means is that there would be a shift of the demand curve to the right. So, we can put that here and illustrate this by a movement of the arrow to the right. Now, if you were asked to write this in written form, you could simply say, the rise in minimum wage levels would result in a shift of the demand curve to the right, due to an increase in demand for MacBooks, ceteris paribus. This is because the increase in minimum wage levels means that the consumer has a greater disposable income, which can now be spent on purchasing additional quantities of the good. Next question. Patricia has recently been granted a promotion, increasing her monthly salary by $400. Evaluate the effect of this on her demand for instant noodles. If we think about it, instant noodles is actually an inferior good because an increase in her monthly salary means that she would have the ability to buy better and more nutritious food, which might be more expensive than instant noodles. So once again, we are given a graph and the initial demand, Patricia's initial demand for instant noodles. So here we would be discussing the market for instant noodles. So we would write that in the title, the market for instant noodles. And the y-axis represents the price of instant noodles, and the x-axis the quantity of instant noodles, or the number of cups she demands. Now, I believe that the demand curve should be moved this way, as we will now be drawing the demand curve shifting to the left. Because with an increase of her salary, she can now purchase better or more nutritious foods. So we illustrate this by drawing the demand curve to the left and explicitly drawing an arrow pointing towards the shift in the curve. This is to ensure that your examiners can identify that you have shifted the demand curve to a certain direction. Now, if you were to write this in written form, you can simply say, due to an increase in her income, Patricia's demand for instant noodles is likely to decrease, illustrated by the shift of the demand curve to the left, ceteris paribus. Make sure you always state ceteris paribus, as we're only looking at one factor affecting her demand. There could be many more, but in this question, just one. This is due to an increase in her disposable income, which gives her the ability to purchase better quality or premium foods. Thank you for watching. Please do leave a comment if you have any questions, like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications for when I post my next video. Until next time!